picked what appeared to be a speck of dirt on her robes, but the black mote obstinately refused to move. If she were one of the swamp wizards, she might take the stubborn mark as a sign of an ill twist of her skein, an omen of foreboding. Since she was an acknowledged master of the arcane arts in the greatest nation in the world, she decided to take it as a sign that her robes needed washing. "Why are you here, Furia?" Severus asked, his tone polite and friendly, but clearly curious. They'd exchanged their traditional greetings and pleasantries, but after half an hour it was clear he wanted her to get to the point. To be fair, it was a good question, one she'd asked herself twice already this morning. She was supposed to be retired. She was retired, damn it. Faced with the need to climb the winding stair up to delving, the conviction that she would have to come here in person to persuade Severus to give up the scrolls had nearly cracked. Perhaps a letter by Heliopticon would have sufficed after all. It was good to see Severus, though. It had been too long since the two of them had talked face to face. She considered telling him that, but decided she owed her old friend the truth. Enough beating around the bush. She would just have to come out and say it. "I've come to ask you to give up the scrolls. You should put them into law." Severus's eyes widened with surprise. His tone hinted at his anger as he responded. "We discussed this several times, Furia. My answer was no then. It's still no. I don't trust the Empire to use the spells wisely." Furia nodded in acknowledgement of Severus's recollection of their past disagreements. She expected no less, but she had planned for this. "You were right then, Severus. I was wrong. But I'm not asking you to put the rituals into Imperial law. I'm asking you to consider putting them into Urizen law." Severus opened his mouth to respond, but then shut it again. It was one thing to argue that some foreign fool might anger the king under the mountain by abusing the rituals, but it was quite another thing to claim that an Urizeni would be so unwise. Clearly unhappy with the idea, he searched for the right response. "Why should we give up our great possession? Will other covens do the same? Those that were inclined to be generous gave up their own rituals centuries ago. Those that hung on to them, why does this change anything for them?" "It changes everything. This is not the Empire's law, Severus, it's ours." Furia could feel her emotions rising, and rather than hold them back, she immersed herself in them, letting them shape her words and fill them with urgency. "It belongs to us, and to us alone. Let the Dornish have their armies, and the Marchers have their farms. The Coast and the League can haggle with each other for coins. It's magic that makes this nation extraordinary. Our own law is something that every Urizeni magician can take pride in. When was the last time you felt that pride, Severus?" "They won't value them like they should." Severus's voice trailed off. He was not yet convinced, but her words had hit home. "No, they won't," she replied. "They won't value them the way that you do, that's true. So make them value them, put a price on them. We're magicians, not merchants," he spat, the contempt in his voice plain. Furia grinned. She had the old architect exactly where she wanted him now. His pride was already on the line. Now she just had to appeal to his professionalism. "What was it that you once said to the Conclave? We should stop grubbing in the dirt for coins and instead lift our eyes to the stars. Only then will we see what we can accomplish. Well then, lift your eyes to the stars, Severus. You have something to offer. What great change could you accomplish with such a treasure?" Some heavenly music. When the Grand Library of Canterspire was ceded to the Eternal Phaleron by the Imperial Senate, it signalled the creation of Urizen Law. This special body of magical knowledge is only available to Urizen citizens. During the autumn equinox 383 YE, nearly half a dozen rituals were entered into Urizen Law by Imperial magicians. As the awareness of its potential spreads, a number of groups within the nation have come forward to propose magical texts for the inclusion in Urizen Law. Adding a ritual to Urizen Law requires the ritual text to be the target of the Gift of Knowledge ritual, a ritual that is not itself part of Urizen Law. With that in mind, the custodians of these unique ritual tomes will need to come to Anvil and find someone, ideally a fellow Urizeni, capable of working the magic required. While motivated by altruism to a point, these custodians are still ambitious and have a concern for the prosperity of themselves and their spires. With that in mind, most of the groups have conditions that must be met before they will share their personal lore with their fellow Urizeni. It's also worth noting that none of these magicians are interested in adding their unique rituals to Imperial lore. Had they had any desire to do so, they would have presented them to the Conclave already. Out of character note, in each section, we've detailed the grimoires that are being proposed to become part of Urizen Law and the rituals they contain. Each of these is introduced with a few sentences of in-character text explaining the ritual and an out-of-character box that summarises the game information about the ritual. These out-of-character boxes, which can be found on the wiki, but for posterity's sake we'll also be reading them out for you, are essentially representing the academic details shared by the NPCs who own the books, translated into clear terms. An opportunity to look at the actual text of the rituals as it would appear on the wiki will generally exist during the event, depending on the role-playing in the field. In each case, it's impossible to put some of the rituals in a book into Urizen Law without including others, without literally tearing pages out of these valuable tomes, something the characters who own them will not countenance under any circumstances. Likewise, none of the spires who are proposing their precious ritual texts for inclusion in Urizen Law have any interest whatsoever in sharing those rituals with the wider Empire. As the flavour text for this Wind of Fortune indicates, they'd already have done that if there was any way to persuade them to. Where a ritual uses the power of an Eternal, we've made that explicit, and also included the details of the assurance that is built into the agreement with the magicians who formulated the ritual. If the assurance is broken, the ritual ceases to function. While it's certainly possible for the Eternal to empower the ritual again, it would require a new set of negotiations, and there's no guarantee that it will work the same way that it did previously. And finally, all the rituals listed within this Wind of Fortune are in a table at the bottom of the wiki page. The Architects of Stone. The architect community at Delving in Redoubt proposes that a grimoire, A Year of Perfect Stillness, be added to Urizen Law. They are asking the Senate to commission an appraisal on their behalf. The book, A Year of Perfect Stillness, contains 3 rituals: Raise the Dragonsworn Cohort, Stone's Unyielding Defiance, and Vital Strength of the Earth. Arbiter Severus of Delving, or one of their deputies, will attend Anvil on Sunday morning to speak to either the Crystal Architect of the Spires or the Senator for Redoubt. Arbiter Severus of Delving, a spire known for their expertise in working stone, in engineering, and in mining. Home to a number of respected architects, they're among the first to see the potential benefits of sharing some of their personal lore with their fellow Urizeni. They're also on good terms with the Eternal Adamant, and have been for quite some time, it appears. So far, Severus has sidestepped questions as to how long exactly they've been on good terms with the Throne of Stone, given that until recently he was believed to have been ignoring the Empire. Regardless of the details, the Architects of Delving have presented a tome of magic for inclusion in Urizen Law, A Year of Perfect Stillness, which contains 3 potent rituals formulated with the assistance of the Deep Dragon and his koboldi. Under normal circumstances, it is unlikely that they would risk offending Adamant by making the rituals more commonly available, but, by all accounts, the Eternal is predisposed to help the people of Urizen. The creation of the three Watchers and the public thanks issued by the Urizen Assembly, as well as the mandate encouraging Urizeni to work with Eternals, have all apparently factored into the Architects of Delving receiving his blessing to share the magic he's helped to create. The Architects at Delving are deeply concerned about the situation in Urizen at the moment. While they do see the benefits of sharing their proprietary knowledge with their fellow Urizen, they're not prepared to do so without some kind of recompense. Prosperity demands nothing less. Before they will allow a year of perfect stillness to be placed in Urizen law, they want the Imperial Senate to commission an appraisal on their behalf. The appraisal would instruct the civil service to find ideal spots in Urizen where new fortifications might be built to better protect the nation. In Spiral and Zenith, where possible, as well as Redoubt and Morrow. They've expressed no unified opinion on which of the three prognosticators would be engaged to oversee the appraisal. Efficiency, creativity, or diplomacy are all equally acceptable. Severus, or more likely a deputy given the Arbiter's age, will be bringing a year of perfect stillness to Anvil on Sunday morning to be entered into Urizen law, assuming that the Senate has commissioned the appraisal. They have asked to meet with the Crystal Architect of the Spires, or, should the title have not been appointed, with Andronikos of the Lighthouse at Nicophorus, the Senator for Redoubt. The expectation is that whoever they meet will have secured an Urizen magician able to cast the gift of knowledge, although they are prepared to provide the mana and welt silver themselves. The scrolls that encompass a year of perfect stillness contain a trio of magical rituals. Two of the rituals, Raise the Dragonswarm Cohort and Stone's Unyielding Defiance, draw directly on the Eternal's power, while the third, Vital Strength of the Earth, was formulated with the assistance of his Koboldi, but only uses mortal magic. Hall of the Newborn Sun. The Quaestor and Illuminate community from the Hall of the Newborn Sun propose the Book of the Restless Spirit be added to Urizen law. They are asking the Imperial Synod to uphold a statement of principle on their behalf. Their grimoire contains 4 rituals: Silence of the Bronze Bell, Resolution of Falling Stars, A Light That Moves, and Net of Gossamer Chains. If the statement has been upheld, Arbiter Aphrodisias will attend Anvil on Sunday morning with the grimoire to speak to the priests of the Urizen Assembly. Before it was overrun by the Druge, the Hall of the Risen Sun in Zenith Accursion was a grand cathedral dedicated to the virtues of pride and ambition. Since the reign of Emperor Walter, they'd been somewhat reticent about involving themselves in the politics beyond the borders of Zenith. But in recent years, they had been paying close attention to affairs of the Synod and Senate once more. When the Orcs came, some of the inhabitants were able to flee with the aid of the Highborn armies, but many of the most devout were captured attempting to rescue the centuries of philosophical texts held in the cathedral library. Nothing further was heard from these unfortunate souls until the spring equinox 383 YE, and the desperate rescue launched into the conquered territory. Among those rescued were 24 Illuminates and Quaestors from the Hall of the Risen Sun, some of whom had managed to conceal a handful of valuable tomes from the hateful eyes of the Druge. Now united with their fellows and with the encouragement of the Imperial Synod and the support of their erstwhile hosts at the Temple of Weave, the priests planned to found a new spire, the Hall of the Newborn Sun, in the mountains of southeastern Morrow, not far from the 3 Watchers. Their new arbiter, Aphrodisias of the Newborn Sun, has proposed that one of the grimoires recovered from Zenith, the Book of the Restless Spirit, be included in Urizen law as a way to ensure that the contents are not lost again. The priests of the Hall of the Newborn Sun consider the book to be priceless, but its inclusion in Urizen Law, and by extension in the Library of Phaleron, would ensure that it's not lost to the vagaries of fate. There is some disagreement among the priests of the new temple as to the wisdom, and capital W wisdom, of this course of action. As a consequence of this, and with an eye to recent events, they've asked the priests of Urizen to raise and pass a statement of principle in the General Assembly with the following wording. The Imperial Synod recognises that it is neither heresy nor blasphemy to teach that orders may impede passage through the labyrinth by imposing virtuous choices, rather than allowing a pilgrim to come to them through reason and free will. The priests of the Hall of the Newborn Sun don't require it to reach a greater majority, but if the priests of Urizen cannot secure enough support to have it pass, or it's not raised, then they won't allow the Book of the Restless Spirit to be placed into Urizen Law. Aphrodite intends to attend the Anvil Summit on Sunday morning. They will have the Book of the Restless Spirit and have indicated that they will be bringing some of the transcripts of the contents for perusal by anyone who's prepared to make a small donation towards the construction of the new temple. They are expecting to meet with representatives of the Urizen Assembly, ideally including a priest who can perform the gift of knowledge, and will be bringing their own crystal manna and welt silver. According to Aphrodite, the book contains several rituals relating to matters of faith and the spirit, along with short essays compiled over several centuries by the Caestors and Illuminates of the Hall of the Newborn Sun, as each faction engaged in friendly rivalry and sought to convince the other of the merits of their particular philosophy of the spirit. In addition to the selected essays, the book contains 4 rituals: Silence of the Bronze Bell, Resolution of Falling Stars, A Light That Moves, and A Net of Gossamer Chains. Each was formulated at the Halls of Knowledge, either by provosts from the Hall of the Risen Sun or at the behest of the priests. Something that makes its potential inclusion in Urizen Law even more poignant, given the destruction of that magical college. Beneath a bleak spire. The herbalists and healers of the Bleak Tower propose an old book of spring magic called the Well of 9 Stars be included in Urizen Law. They are asking for the Silver Chalice Conclave Order to amend their manifesto in return. The book contains 4 rituals: Fountain's Bounty, Woven the Strands of Life, Wellspring of the High Peak, and A Goblet of Stars. The Arbiter of Bleak Tower and the holder of the book plan to attend Anvil on Sunday morning to meet with the custodian of the Bleak Tower. The Bleak Tower is a relatively new arcane spire founded after the spring equinox 382 YE. Inhabited by refugees from the Garden of Pallas in Zenith and by healers from the Gardens of Morrow that once stood on the slopes of Cayley in Morrow. Both were burned by the Druge, their people scattered, but given new hope when the Senate commissioned a unique arboretum in northwest Ravian. The spire is relatively new, but already securing its reputation as a place of healing and herb lore. While it is built around a winter regio, it's also known for its masters of spring magic, especially that magic that relates to herbs, and has attracted practitioners of green law from across Urizen, eager to study at the Arboretum. One of these newcomers is Cassira Greenwell, a refugee from Spiral. She and her surviving spire mates brought with them an old book given to the founders of their spire when they established Fountainhome Spire in the reign of Empress Rachilda. Called the Well of 9 Stars, it's been handed down from generation to generation, containing a wealth of spring lore relating to green-growing plants. The survivors of Fountainhome Spire have proposed that the book be entered into law as much to reconnect their fellow Urizeni with their pasts as to swell with their understanding of the realm of spring. Arbiter Cyrus of the Bleak Spire agrees, and he's working with Cassira and her fellows to facilitate this outcome. As with the other groups who have rituals to propose for Urizen Law, however, the Well of 9 Stars doesn't come without complications. In their case, the request is somewhat esoteric. As a requirement before the book can become part of Urizen Law, Cassira Greenwell and the members of the Bleak Tower Spire want the newly formed Silver Chalice Conclave Order to make a significant change to its manifesto. Specifically, they want it to officially remove the statement that it exists to look into supporting the long-term efforts to aid the infrastructure and foundations of the Empire. Such change would require a Senate motion under the rules covering formation of conclave orders, but it wouldn't be constitutional in nature. Both Cassira Greenwell and Arbiter Cyrus are quick to make clear that they and their spy mates bear the Order no ill will. On the contrary, they're concerned that the Silver Chalice has erred by choosing 4 goals rather than the traditional 3. 3 is an ideal number, claims Cassira Greenwell. More than 3, and the Order risks becoming unfocused, especially with a goal that's so open-ended as to be functionally meaningless. For the Order to truly be successful, it must have focus. Obviously, it's very unlikely to pass without the support of the Order itself. Taking inspiration from the founding of Bleak Tower Spire and from recent events surrounding Uphold Way House, Arbiter Cyrus has a proposal. He suggests that if Urizen wishes to convince the Silver Chalice to make this change, the Imperial Synod might raise a statement of principle, proposing that the citizens of Urizen offer their support to the Silver Chalice and its good works, either in the National Assembly or the General Assembly. If it passes with a greater majority, Cyrus believes a mandate to secure material support for the newly founded Order, most likely in the form of bequests from herb gardens to the Order Vault, would be a likely consequence. One or both of Arbiter Cyrus and Cassira Greenwell intends to bring the Well of 9 Stars to Anvil during the winter solstice. They hope to meet with the custodian of the Bleak Tower, Storakios, who will hopefully be able to secure someone to perform the gift of knowledge. They will be providing the mana and the Welt Silver, of course. It is the least that they can do. Arbiter Cyrus cautions, however, that the ritual will only go ahead if the Senate has already passed the motion to amend the manifesto of the Silver Chalice. Otherwise, the book will remain available only to the magicians of Bleak Tower. The ritual text being offered by Cassira Greenwell and the Bleak Tower contains some old lore and a number of archaic poems on the topics of plants and the natural world. It also contains 4 spring rituals: Fountain's Bounty, Woven Strands of Life, Wellspring of the High Peak, and a Goblet of Stars. One of the 4, Wellspring of the High Peaks, deals with the eternal Ossagran, and Cassira is quick to offer assurances that it's not been performed since the reign of Emperor Giovanni, often before anyone asks for such reassurances. Sent from the Temple of Swords. The sword scholar Helos of the Moonfall Blade offers a collection of scrolls called a Single Strike for the inclusion in Urizen Law. They are asking for 50 doses of Liao before they will allow the scrolls to be included. The scrolls A Single Strike contain 3 rituals: Chastise the Foolish, the Certainty of Doubt, and Blade of Clear Sight. Helos and several other sword scholars are planning to attend Anvil on the Saturday evening with the scrolls to speak to the envoy to the disciples of the Tempest Jade Maiden. History recounts that the sword scholars have not always been as welcome among the Urizeni, or among Imperial citizens, as they are today. At times vilified and persecuted, several of their temples were forced to go underground to survive. While they are warrior priests first and foremost, they are still Urizen, and some of the treasures that they took with them into their long internal exile took the form of magical lore. So it is with the grimoire known as A Single Strike. Enthused by the support that the Urizen Assembly and the Assembly of Wisdom have both shown for the creed of the Sword Scholar, Helos of the Moonfall Blade has proposed to use one of these hidden grimoires as an addition to Urizen lore. The collected scrolls record details of the Sword Scholar philosophy compiled by the Moonfall Blade Temple, but also include the texts for 3 rituals that have hitherto been carefully guarded by Helos' sect. Not all of the Sword Scholars view such largesse with equanimity, however. Some of them still hold a grudge against their fellows, blaming them in part for the massacre at the Temple of the Winds. As an internal compromise, Helios has secured the approval of at least some of their peers by promising to secure a bounty of Liao before they will allow the book to become a part of law. The Liao will be distributed between several of the Sword Scholar sects and used to create auras in keeping with the wider goal of spreading the teachings of Suleiman throughout Urizen and with the support of the Assembly of Wisdom across the rest of the Empire. At least 50 doses should be sufficient. During the winter solstice, Helios plans to come to Anvil in the company of several of his peers who wish to protect the scrolls and ensure that they are treated with the appropriate respect. They anticipate collecting the bounty of Liao from the envoy to the disciples of the Tempest Jade Maiden, Aspar. They further anticipate that assuming the Liao is forthcoming, Aspar will have secured a suitable expert to perform the gift of knowledge on their scrolls, ideally in the presence of any other sword scholars who've made the long trip to Anvil this season. Unfortunately, Helios will not be able to provide the mana nor the welt silver needed to perform the ritual, but they have expressed hope that this will not present much of an obstacle to the accomplished envoy. These scrolls apparently represent something of a primer on their beliefs, exploring the teachings of Suleiman and her successors and offering guidance to the followers of the Moonfall Temple. It also contains 3 rituals: Chastise the Foolish, the Certainty of Doubt, and the Blade of Clear Sight, that until recently have been solely available only to the Sword Scholar sects. Sentinels stand watch. The Sentinel Lucia of Willstone has been chosen to present the Guardian Gate for inclusion in Urizen Law. No payment is required, only a magician to cast Gift of Knowledge on the book. The Sentinels have asked that a statement of principle of the General Assembly be made to support the restoration of Zenith. The Guardian Gate contains 4 rituals: the Guardian Gate, Irresistible Stance of Force and Focus, Peregrine and Ikemos, and Arete and the Fields of War. Lucia intends to bring the book to Anvil on Saturday evening to meet with the General of the Citadel Guard and their fellow Sentinels. The Court of the White Fountain in Redoubt guards the western end of the Onyx Path into Spiral. Over the last few seasons, it's seen an influx of refugees from the east, leaving their homes in the wake of the peace treaty that cedes Ankara, Sinian and Ateri to the Grendel. The court is once again on the front line between Urizen and the barbarians, for all that they may be foreigners for the time being. With an eye to the defence of their nation in the wake of the harsh political decisions, several arbiters of citadels in various parts of Urizen have met at the court to discuss the challenges of protecting their nation. One of the outcomes of that meeting was a decision to offer the Guardian Gate for inclusion in Urizen Law. The meeting appointed arbiter of Lucia of Willstone to be responsible for overseeing this process, not least because they are a descendant of the original author. Out of character note, any Sentinel character is welcome to roleplay that they attended the meeting at the Court of the White Fountain and engaged in nearly a week of planning, discussion and argument about how best to secure the borders of Redoubt and Morrow, shore up the Citadel Guard, and how to reclaim Zenith from the Druge. The outcome of this meeting, apart from the decision to present the magical tome to Urizen, is obviously beneath the abstraction layer. Lucia of Willstone is bringing the Guardian Gate to Anvil on Saturday evening. They're hoping to meet with the General of the Citadel Guard, currently Nicasia of Phoenix Reach, and with their fellow Sentinels. They expect that the General will be able to find an Urizen capable of casting the Gift of Knowledge and will be bringing the required material components with them. Unlike the representatives of other groups who have grimoires to include in Urizen Law, Lucia and her fellow Sentinels want no particular payment. They're offering these rituals freely and without any strings attached because, as the gathering at the Citadel of the White Flame ultimately agreed, it is the correct thing to do. Statement of principle. The Druge are the greatest threat to Urizen and should be driven from Zenith. Palladius of Highwatch, Statement of Principle, Urizen Assembly, Autumn Equinox, upheld 130-0. Many of the prominent Sentinels of Urizen are in agreement that something needs to be done about the Citadel Guard. The army is in decline. The loss of Zenith and Spiral means that the nation simply cannot support it. Even before the loss of the remaining territory in Spiral, the army was in trouble. Now, with both Zenith and Spiral in barbarian hands, the situation is truly dire. While the keeper of the breadbasket can help delay the inevitable, the Guard will continue to hemorrhage soldiers and supplies. Wisdom, vigilance, and prosperity all say that something must be done. The Empire cannot afford to keep expending resources to keep the Guard's head above water. The future does not look good for the unique and irreplaceable Urizen army. Palladius has already gained the support of the National Assembly with their judgment during the autumn equinox, but it's not clear to the Sentinels what more Urizen can do. They ask that a statement of principle be raised in the General Assembly of the Synod, calling for citizens of every nation to come together to take Zenith back from the Druge. If this is upheld with a greater majority and worded clearly and strongly, then it will hopefully lead to a mandate that will provide constructive opportunities to support the war effort in the Eastern Empire. That is assuming that the Sword Scholars don't interfere with it, of course. The Guardian Gate was written during the reign of Empress Varkula by Atalana of Willstone. An experienced battle mage, Atalana was a proud sentinel for much of her life, before eventually retiring to expand her arete through the study of ritual magic. A self-confessed middling magician, she nonetheless rose to become one of the first provosts of the Halls of Knowledge. During her tenure, she worked almost exclusively on rituals with military applications. Her experience as a sentinel and events during the assimilation of Zenith established a lifelong commitment to using magic to support the defenders of Urizen. The Guardian Gate is a short book of advice for magicians who support sentinels that also contains 4 of the rituals she devised as provost. The book contains 4 rituals. The Guardian Gate, for which the whole collection is named, Irresistible Stance of Force and Focus, Peregrine and Ikimos, and Arete and the Fields of War. Song, Mirror and Flame. The Stargazer, named Oleg the Wanderer, is a custodian of an old grimoire called Concordance of Earthbound Stars. They will bring the tome to Anvil for inclusion in Urizen Law if the Empire is enchanted with bright eyes gleam in the depths before the end of the autumn equinox 384 YE. The book contains 4 rituals: Mirror of Perfection, Flame and the Flood, an Echo of Songs, and the Stargazer's Astrolabe. Oleg will visit Anvil as soon as possible after the prerequisite ritual is cast, but will need someone to perform Gift of Knowledge, and cannot supply the materials to do so themselves. Many Stargazers would be among the first to admit that they can come across a little peculiar. Oleg the Wanderer is no exception. A philosopher of magical theory known for their cheerful disposition, the peripatetic Naga flouts Urizeni tradition by calling no particular spire their home. I am a citizen of Urizen, as they frequently put it. Magic doesn't tie itself down. Why should I? For the past 3 decades, they've moved from spire to spire around Morrow, relying largely on charity and the modest income from 5 books of arcane lore published by Spider's Vantage Spire in Redoubt. Their books are considered trashy at best, much like their author, and more popular outside the borders of Urizen than within. So it came as something of a surprise when Oleg turned up at the Grand Library of Canterspire in possession of a grimoire of powerful magical rituals, some of them using hitherto unknown magical techniques. The Stargazer is reticent to enter into any discussion of where the book came from, merely offering enthusiastic reassurances that everything is above board and that they are the trusted custodian of the magic contained within. After asking a number of very precise questions about how precisely Urizen law differs from Imperial law, they've expressed a keen interest in sharing the contents with the rest of the nation. While they're keen to share the contents of the Concordance of Earthbound Stars, Oleg wants something in return. After what are described as extensive discussions with my talented peers, Oleg is interested in harmonizing the omnihedron, as they put it. Specifically, they want a coven to perform the ritual Bright Eyes Gleam in the Depths. Both Hallow of the Green World and Wondrous Forests of the Night have been cast already, and the missing rituals are still not codified. But Bright Eyes has not been performed in living memory. If nothing else, they're interested to see what happens, given how the castings of the two previous rituals have shaken out. Oleg appreciates that it's no easy matter to perform a ritual of this magnitude at short notice, and has announced intentions to take a sabbatical to visit Casanea for a year or so. They'll be on hand if someone completes the ritual and will head to Anvil as soon as possible, grimoire in hand, to have it added to Urizen Law by the coven who performed the ritual. But if their ritual hasn't been cast by the end of Autumn 384YE, their offer is withdrawn. Incidentally, Oleg will need someone to provide them the mana, wealth, silver, and mastery to perform the Gift of Knowledge. Outside of being custodian of a fabulous magical grimoire, their funds are very limited indeed. The book contains 3 rituals that make extensive use of astronomantic power. Mirror of Perfection, Flame and the Flood, and an Echo of Songs, and 1 ritual that grants improved ability to examine magical effects, the Stargazer's Astrolabe. Oleg claims that the book is very old, handed down from Stargazer to Stargazer, since the rituals were first codified. Allegedly, as a result of cooperation between legendary Varushkan magician Parkanon and a trio of ancient Stargazers. These 3 rituals, Mirror of Perfection, Flame and the Flood, and an Echo of Songs, rely not only on the quantities of Ilium that allow magic to be made a permanent part of the world, but also on the unique magical properties of mana sites, forests, and mines. There are no rituals to do anything similar with other personal resources, and any arcane projection attempting to will fail. A business, a congregation, a military unit, or similar all lack the innate spark of magic that's required for a ritual such as this to work.